Now, for more on the UK elections, I'm joined by Professor Noel Ferguson from the World's Leadership Institute. Professor Ferguson, appreciate your time. Now, Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party, what impact do you think Rishi Sunak's leadership has had on the party's current standing in the polls?
I think Rishi's leadership hasn't had a huge impact because if you recall, his predecessors included Boris Johnson, they included Liz Truss, and they were embroiled in a whole range of upheaval and lack of integrity and lack of probity, etc. So Rishi's actually had a difficult 18 months trying to say that he can recover from all of the bad things the Conservative Party have done in the preceding 12 and a half years. But having said that, the entirety of the party, I think the public have been fed up now with the Conservative Party. Because to give you an example, whenever one of their parliamentarians broke the rules, then Boris Johnson tried to say, well, let's just change the rules so that bad things can be acceptable. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, he has not been in high office, elected high office. And if you recall, a number of years ago, the Labour Prime Minister of the day, Gordon Brown, who was the successor to Tony Blair, he's almost in the same mould as Keir Starmer. They're more managers as opposed to leaders. They're almost like a steady hand on the ship, but they don't inspire confidence to say, hey, we're off into a bright and bold new future.
But so I suppose that the question is, does the UK need a manager or does it need a leader?
At least somebody who can do both, and that's the difficulty. And it depends on the task at hand. Some things you want to give people assurance to say, yes, we're going to manage this situation and remain within boundaries. And for other things, it's a case of, yes, we can have a bright future. Let's lead over the horizon and do something which is going to be good. I think what we have seen in the Conservative government in the past 12 years has been neither leadership nor management. It's almost been guess the role today of the Prime Minister. But one of your contributors said just before I came on, they're hopeful and they're optimistic, but nobody will actually say what they're hopeful of or what they're optimistic for. And that's the difficulty. None of these parties have said, this is what we stand for in future. It's all been a case of don't vote for the other people because these are the consequences that you will endure, as opposed to saying, this is what we will give you.
OK, so you raise an important point there, Professor, and that's the various political parties have not said what it is that they stand for. But we know that the citizens of the UK are going to the polls because they do have certain expectations. So what are the main issues that are driving voters to the polls in this particular election?
Well, let's come back to that phraseology. What do we stand for? Essentially, the citizenship have now said we are no longer prepared to stand for the nonsense that we've endured over the preceding parliaments. People are concerned about the cost of living prices. They're concerned about, taxation is always a big issue, but both of the parties have kind of played it down and said, we will not raise your taxes. Nobody has actually said, we will take the money you contribute and invest it into a brighter future. And nobody's actually encouraging the voters around that kind of, ethos. People are concerned about, will they be able to pay their mortgage or buy sufficient food this time next week, this time next month?
Now, how do the Labour and the Conservative Party differ in their approaches to handling the economy and post-Brexit challenges? Because there have been quite a few of those challenges.
There have. Everybody can point the finger at Brexit and say, oh, it's all because of Brexit that we're in the mess we're in now. And some people can say, well, those people who wanted to remain, they had the wrong ideas, etc. Sorry, just recap that question. I've just lost that quick train of thought.
So I was saying, how do the Labour and Conservative parties differ in their approach to handling the economy?
Okay, yes. Indeed. So if you look at the Conservatives, they've been very much about putting the power into the hands of the individual. You take responsibility for your own future. Go out, get a good education, go out and start an enterprise or a business or get gainful employment. The Labour Party are very much seem to be more about an egalitarian society. We will look after the people who are in difficulty. Don't worry about the future. We'll look after you. But really what everybody needs is a halfway house of these two parties. And to be encouraged to say, yes, you can take responsibility, but if things go wrong, then we will also be there to support you. But as it stands at the minute, both of these two parties are in bipolar opposites of that. So it's a difficult choice. And that's where other parties are starting to creep in. You maybe heard about Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, who are trying to steal some of the Conservative votes so they might make a little bit of headway into the Conservative areas.
Well, if we are to look for insight, there's some insight that's been proffered by the recent YouGov MRP poll, which predicts a significant Labour victory. Are you familiar with this poll, and what are your thoughts on the possible outcomes?
Well, and then I just been looking at the polling figures just before I came on air, and it's kind of predicting that Labour will have 420 seats in the Parliament, and it only needs 326 to have a majority. And that's why it's saying that this will be, in modern day history, the largest landslide in political history in the UK. And if you think back to, was it 1998, whenever Labour almost done the same and had a landslide, this one's going to be even larger, potentially, but yet it's been at the helm of Keir Starmer, who I say is not so much an aspirational leader, he's a manager. So if he actually steps up to the mark, he can do substantially more with that majority than what Tony Blair did in the 90s.
So what happens to Rishi Sunak's political future if this indeed is the outcome?
Well, this is the interesting thing. If Rishi Sunak is re-elected as a Member of Parliament, he has said that he will remain in the UK. He will fulfil his commitment as an MP and serve his constituents. Now, we all know that Rishi Sunak is reasonably wealthy. He can afford to just jack everything in and say, you know what, I've had enough. I'm going somewhere else. Let's go and, live in a quiet ideal somewhere else in the world. So will he stand? It's quite a test of his integrity. Will he say what he, will he remain and deliver for his constituents, or will he walk away into the sunset? And if he goes into the sunset, people will be saying, "Ha, told you so. We knew that we couldn't trust you."
So what are the potential scenarios if no party achieves a majority in the election? And I mean, based on, this is obviously theoretical, because based on polls, it is likely that one party will achieve a significant majority. But in the event that it doesn't happen?
In the event that it doesn't happen, it will be the same kind of situation as what's happened in South Africa in the past number of weeks. We will need to work towards a coalition where everybody should be working together. And essentially, that's where politics should be. It should be an elimination of the politics to move towards discussion and dialogue and collaboration. Because while any country continues to be, it's them against us, it's not our fault, it's theirs, unless everybody works together, there will not be a cohesive future for the entire society to work towards.
So looking at a Labour government and a Labour victory, how would it likely change the political landscape in the UK?
Well, obviously, you'll have a socialist government in terms of representing the entirety of the landscape. But it will remain to be seen how those disaffected voters, so say, for instance, the non-Labour voters, whether they will then start to feel part of the next solution for the next 5 years. Will they feel able to contribute or participate or to be heard by their constituents? And this is the thing, it doesn't matter who the MP is in your constituency. No matter what your party affiliation or your political beliefs, you should still be able to go to them. Politics should be stripped out and your local concerns should be listened to. So will we move towards an area where politics are put to the side and people's concerns are put to the forefront? I don't know. I doubt that very much, but that's what society needs. It's, everybody working together, not to the exclusion of others.
And how's the Labour government likely to deal with issues around immigration? Because those have been topical in the last few months. And also, what is their attitude towards some of the conflict that we've got across the globe?
Well, let's look at the immigration to start with. The whole topic gets mixed up and kind of smushed together. So you can have migration, you can have refugees, you can have immigrants. And in the press, what we have seen is the boatloads of refugees who have been travelling from northern France to the south of the UK to gain refugee status. Now, certain political parties are pointing to them and saying they are immigrants, they should not be allowed into the country. Well, really, they're refugees. So we need to understand the real language between this and not just clump anybody coming into the country as an immigrant. People come in for different circumstances and different contexts. With regards to the conflict which is going on across the world, UK is obviously involved through NATO and through Europe with the conflict in the Eastern Europe with Russia and Ukraine. It has been supportive up to this point. There has been claims by the Conservative Party that the Labour government will take a step back and will not necessarily be as forthright in encouraging Ukraine, but the Labour leader has said he will sustain that commitment. But you know what it's like. Everybody makes a promises in order to get through the door. And then once they get through the door, they can say, oh, you know what? We've had a look around at, this property we've just purchased. It's not quite what we thought it was. So therefore, we're going to do something different. So no matter what they do, they will find a reason to get out of it. But it's something that we need to acknowledge and be prepared for.
All right, now, it took us a few weeks here in South Africa to get a functional government. What are the next steps after the election results are announced over there in the UK?
Well, it's interesting you say a functional government. Does any government actually function, no matter whenever it's elected? We can interpret what this functioning actually means. Well, the next steps, of course, is at 10 p.m. tonight, British Standard Time, then the exit polls will be announced by the BBC and ITV and Channel 4 in the UK. So we'll get a big insight into what it's likely to be like at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. There'll be a flurry of activity overnight. Of course, in all of the county will take place. There's an expression of, I think the Manchester United manager, Alex Ferguson, used to say, whenever he was concerned, he would say, it's squeaky bum time. And I think overnight it will be squeaky bum time for an awful lot of politicians, particularly Conservatives who are expecting to lose their seat, but, an anticipation of joy by Labour candidates.
And very quickly, Professor, how soon after the election will the new government be expected to implement its policies and priorities?
Oh, good. Well, this is the interesting thing, because whenever Rishi Sunak Keir Starmer was questioned, how long will this thing take? How long, when will we see real change? He's always said, well, once we get into government, we'll do the assessment and then we'll anticipate how long it will take to do these things. So in answer to your question, there is no answer. Even Keir Starmer has said this. And that's actually a wise thing to do, because you can't make a promise of something until you get into the house of number 10 and see how bad the circumstances are. Only then can you really plan and say, OK, it'll take 10 years to fix the National Health Service. It'll take 25 years to fix immigration. It'll take 30 years to fix infrastructure. And only by making concrete and assessed plans, that's the best thing that they have to do. And hopefully they will do that.
Professor Noel Ferguson from the World's Leadership Institute, appreciate your time walking us through the elections in the United Kingdom as we speak.